the way our language separates these concepts, as opposed to like holding them together like a yin yang, has us pursuing things in like a wrong-headed way, like trying to pick one side of a unity and argue that that side's right, and then somebody else picks the other side of the unity and argues that that's right, and we get stuck in these arguments of either or. The thing that I'm okay causing harm to will end up harming the thing that I care about. How is it that we can ask a question about something that we don't know about? There has to be some basic that we do know about. And then what does this question do? It takes us into the unknown. And that to me was really exciting. And so, yeah, I love questions. And I think that if we can humble ourselves enough to be able to ask, it takes a humbling, because you have to go, I don't know that. And how do I actually try to get to know that? It can be, I don't know you. How do I actually try to get to know you? And if we approach the world in that way, not like, oh, I already know it, I have mastered this, we can elicit more of the potential of what's in every single one of us, every single being. And when we do that, we can find our commonalities. We can find our shared similarities and differences. And then we start understanding more of these webs of interconnections and get off of our sort of high horse of thinking, well, we're the apex, creature on this earth. We're not. There are creatures that, have solved a lot of evolutionary problems already and are being able to relate to them in ways other than, oh, that's just fill in the blank. The whale might help us be able to solve ocean acidification if we only opened ourselves to what the whale knows.
Hello everyone, welcome to Love and Philosophy. This is Andrea Hiott, and here we explore philosophical, scientific, technological, and even poetic spaces beyond either or bounds. This episode is going to be about language, a topic you will be hearing or reading more about from me if you are following Waymaking, and also if any of you know of anyone I should talk to about language, I would love to hear. So what if the way we use language is keeping us stuck in a certain kind of world or a certain sort of cognitive idea of what our choices are? Today's guest, Lisa, has written a book called Embracing Paradox, Evolving Language, that challenges us to question this possibility, this either-or thinking that we might be embedded in, that we might be rhythmically used to because of the way we speak, because of the way things have been structured through contrasts. And of course that reflects what we see, what we focus on, what reality is real or present to our senses. So Lisa's going to walk us through this wonderful metaphor of the Mobius Strip. If you've never seen a Mobius Strip or heard of it, maybe look at it online or somewhere, or just grab a sheet of paper and twist it and connect the two ends. Lisa will kind of walk us through that. If you're watching it, you can see her do that. If you're just listening, you can imagine it. She describes it very well, and you can also just have a look. But it's basically a surface that looks like it has two sides, but it's one continuous whole. So you can just kind of go all the way around. I love these sorts of figures, and they appear a lot in a lot of my projects, so you've probably seen something like that before. But it's a great image for this thinking that she's inviting us into, which is not choosing between. So it's, embracing paradox. I mean, if some of you probably know, I published this little pamphlet called Embracing Paradox, which is actually how I ended up meeting Lisa, because someone said, oh, you have to meet her because she wrote a book called that about language. We were at an event in the United Kingdom, and someone sort of put us together. And that's how we ended up having this conversation, which is just wonderful. But through the Mobius Strip, she's, it's a way of holding paradox, embracing paradox, which doesn't mean trying to solve one side into the other. It's not about picking sides. It's not about deciding if nature is better or nurture is better or whatever. It's not about connection versus distinction or differentiation. It's not about choosing one of those or championing one of those all the time, even though you might champion both of them at different times in different situations. So it's really about learning to hold these multiple truths at once. And that's what we explore here. That's what the Mobius Strip is the metaphor of for her book. And she tries to focus us on how we might be doing that with our language, and how a lot of things we face, challenges we face, might be connected to this way of thinking that is both evident in our language, how we created our language, how we're using it, but also maybe the agency to become aware of it and change it from within. We can't change it from without. It's a living languaging, as one of my favorites, Maturana, would say. So, it's not about solving problems. It's about holding the space of what we think are the oppositions and seeing if something else might open, some kind of constellation of other possibilities that we didn't even know were possible. Other ways of being alive, possibilities that we can hardly even imagine from our current vantage point, because that happens all the time. It's really possible. You can look all around you at different forms of life that have particular ways of sensing the world that seem like everything but aren't. And we know that as humans because we have this amazing capacity to care for other forms of life. But it's also true about us. And they can probably, other animals and other creatures can probably see ways that we don't actually explore the world around us. And yet we have the possibility to change that. So that's what we talk about here. And we bring up everything from hummingbirds to whales to how to trust the world to synchronicities in a more magical sense than the synchrony that we talked about through neuroscience in the last, or 2 episodes ago. And we talk about what Parker Palmer and I had talked about, I think, about the love being the field that holds it all together, what that might mean. We talk about a lot of stuff. So welcome to Love and Philosophy. I'm really glad you're here. Thanks for trying to embrace the paradox with us, and hope you enjoy this conversation, which is we just went at it freestyle to talk about her book, and I think it's actually really generative and beautiful. So thanks to Lisa, and thanks to you for listening, and I hope you have a great day wherever you are, and maybe this helps you see something challenging in a little bit different way. All right, bye. Yeah, so I want to try to show your book. I wonder if I can. Let's see. I wonder if it will come. Because it's so beautiful, this book. Wow. I love it. This, artwork.
My friend John did that, and as soon as I saw it,
so cool.
I knew that had to be the cover of the book.
You could just be lost in that picture,
Oh,
I mean,
totally.
It's very hard, I think, to draw something that actually seems to embrace paradox. I mean, we're going to talk about some of these figures that you talk about in the book, but this is really doing a good job. So I really want everyone to see it. Anyway, hi, Lisa. It's really good to see you, and thanks for coming on Love and Philosophy.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. It's good to see you too.
Now, I just love your book, and it's called Embracing Paradox. Actually, there's more. Embracing Paradox, Evolving Language. But the Embracing Paradox, everyone who's heard me say anything knows I'm always talking about holding paradox, embracing paradox. So I just love the title of your book, and I love that it's about language. And I want to hear, how did you come to writing this? Or what do we need to know about you that got you to this point of thinking about paradox, much less embracing it?
Okay, how far back shall we go? Let's go back to college.
Okay, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, because that's really kind of where the seeds took root. First in physics class and learning about, light can be both a wave and a particle. And that was kind of like, what? And then reading Gödel Escher Bach by Hofstadter and learning about the Mobius Strip and the Klein bottle. And then learning Chinese philosophy and yin and yang and how they're, mutually, like you can't have one without the other. Actually, I have a very cute cartoon hanging on my refrigerator where it's like half of a yin yang symbol in a hotel room on the phone saying, "I miss you too."
That's sweet. Yeah, it's actually funny, but every page of the book you reference something that I love. Gödel Escher Bach or Buckminster Fuller or something from the Tao. Or it's really great. But let's try to give people an idea of embracing paradox. So you're in college and you started discovering those things. Was it like opening the world, or it was just really exciting, a new way of thinking about things? Or
it was like putting on a new set of glasses, and suddenly I started seeing the world differently. I started seeing the world in terms of these interconnected concepts. Like an easy one in psychology class. There was a debate about nature versus nurture. Is it genetics? Is it the way you were raised? And, it's both. Can't everybody see that? I was like, of course it's both. And I realized eventually that the way our language separates these concepts, as opposed to like holding them together like a yin yang, has us pursuing things in like a wrong-headed way, like trying to pick one side of a unity and argue that that side's right, and then somebody else picks the other side of the unity and argues that that's right, and we get stuck in these arguments of either or, instead of looking at not just the unity, but the mutual codependence, the way one influences the other. How does genetics influence nurture? How does nurture influence genetics? And in fact, we got the whole field of epigenetics by kind of looking at that. Well, not specifically that in terms of child raising, but in terms of, how the environment influences the genes, then alter our behavior towards the environment.
yeah, it's kind of wild how when you look at the history of, well, just about everything, that it's often arguments about either or. And to take a step back and realize there's another way of seeing that is, I mean, once you've done it, it becomes possible. But until you've done it, you're just kind of stuck in that mindset, right? Of either or. It's almost like that's kind of the default as you talk about it. You talk about the default settings. But what does that have to do with language?
Can we do a little show and tell so that people are familiar with, like what does it actually mean to embody both either or and both and?
Yeah, I hope you're going to show a Mobius strip.
Yeah, let's do some showing.
Okay, great. Yeah, because that's a big part at the beginning of the book that you introduced. So yeah.
Yeah. This is kind of like the foundation for the whole book. So people are familiar with a strip of paper. It's got two sides. You can turn it into a ring and hang it on your bunch of these on your Christmas tree. But the Mobius strip, so the difference is a ring has a clear inside and a clear outside. And to get from inside to outside, you have to like literally jump your finger around the edge here. So you have to, whereas to make a Mobius strip, you take one side of this and you flip it over and grab my tape. Okay, so now you have this thing that looks like a figure 8. And because we've taped opposite sides together, they have become one side. So if you run your finger around the whole Mobius strip, it takes you, from inside to outside to inside, and you can't really tell. The same thing as if you run your finger along the edge, you can just keep going forever and ever without ever lifting your finger off the edge. So this gives you an interesting model or a metaphor for thinking about things that seem to have an either-or relationship. But if you look at them as a whole like this, you can see that it's a both-and relationship. So you have both either-or at a local level. Like if you were an ant crawling along the edge, it would still look like a regular piece of paper that has an either-or. But if you can stand back from it and hold it and, see it in its entirety, you get that, oh, this is a one-sided surface. It just seems to have two sides. And so that kind of thinking where you can put the two together and go, okay, well, I can hold them in their distinctness, in their seeming to have opposite sides or to be opposite sides, and I can hold them in their unity of, oh, that's kind of, just a trick of the mind. There's actually just one side. It just seems to be two-sided. And so that's the kind of embracing paradox that I am talking about in this book, of being able to hold both of those positions simultaneously. Like we need distinctions. We can't get rid of distinctions in life because, then stuff doesn't work. But we also need to see that there's a unity underlying the distinctions. And the language part comes in that we've grown up thinking that because they're two different words for the distinctions, that means they're real. That means they are indeed separate. And I'm trying to say, well, no, they're distinct, but they're not separate.
Right. So a lot of it depends on the position too. You talked about the ant, and at whatever place the ant is at, if we're going to measure it, we could say it's inside or outside relative to some position, but you could always kind of move to a different position and it would be different. But those distinctions matter at the same time that they're not absolute in some kind of way. And that embracing that's a very hard thing to hold, I think, for people to, because even in your book, you talk about either or. It's not necessarily that we're rejecting the either or for the both
Right.
and. We're trying to hold.
It's the same either or position.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to argue for both and instead of either or, you're still stuck in either or. It took me a few years to realize that, because that's what I started doing, is, saying it's both and, until I realized that it's be both and, you have to include either or.
Yeah, I've started thinking of it. I try to think of it through constellations or kaleidoscopic, these kinds of things, which people find very hard to understand what I'm talking about. But it's because of that. It's because it's so easy to get, because of the language, into this habit again of either or, even though we think we're talking about something more like the Mobius strip. We're using language right now to try to talk about it, which can make it so hard, right? So, I mean, is the premise, are you saying like we need to find a whole new way of languaging Is it about, I mean, you talk about questioning a lot. Is it about, are we trying to develop a different awareness of language, or are we trying to develop a new language? Or how would you begin to sort of express that to people about that idea here?
It's actually bigger than that. Because the language is grounded in the culture. And in order to really change people's ability to perceive these kinds of relationships, it'll take more than just inventing new words. It'll really take helping people see the relatedness, and then the language part will be a little easier. Trying to just change language without changing the worldview or the paradigm or the mindset that underlies it is tough. And we see that happening all over. You know, people invent all kinds of great new words. Holon, panarchy, holarchy, being. There've been all kinds of new words invented, but because the mindset underlying the language, which is the separateness mindset, remains intact, the words don't catch on. And the second point is that words are only one part of the system that is language. And if you've studied systems theory, you know that sometimes just tweaking one little part will not change the whole system, because the system is set up to keep itself running in the way that it runs. And so just changing or adding a new word, I don't think is sufficient, because language consists also of the way we put words together, the syntax. The way we put ideas together, which is the logic, the way we put our experience into categories, you know, which is the category structure. And then the logic kind of enforces the category structure. So, or no, the category structure enforces the logic. So, you know, you can reason, you know, Socrates is a man, all men are mortal, Socrates is mortal. But if you said Socrates is a dog, all dogs are mortal. Remember Socrates, you know, it's like, hold it. Socrates actually doesn't fit into the category of dog. And what the new way of perceiving is forcing us to do is stretch our categories. We've got categories that are narrow, like this or that, and now we're trying to broaden the category into actually you can have this and that. And so that's a much harder thing to change.
In a way, we're trying to understand that the language that we use is a way to communicate about what is dynamic and always moving and changing, and actually never fits into any of the things that we're using language as if it contains. I mean, this is very hard, but even categories, they're dynamic. All of this is kind of, if we're looking at what we're describing, what we're trying to talk about, they're not actually broken into categories and all of this. What we're doing with using language and communicating is actually doing something in the world that's important. We are making connections together, and life is kind of working through this. At the same time, what we're discussing is ongoing and dynamic and will always need to be sort of reconsidered. So isn't that kind of hard to talk about too?
Yeah. So this is a good example of how like the culture influences the language. American culture based on English, which is based on, you know, some Romance and Germanic languages, parses the world into things. It's a very noun heavy kind of language. There are other languages that see other cultures, I should say, that see the world more in terms of processes, of things changing, of, the seasons always doing this, the sun and the moon always doing this, and that um, the even the things that we think are static are always changing. And so that's reflected in their language, which, could be like a very verb-oriented language. I was at a conference once where they were trying to get this idea across to us. And so instead of like just having our name on our name tags, like Lisa, Andrea, we had to turn it into a verb. So I was Lisa-ing.
That's
I
cool.
was, becoming Lisa. The Hopi have a way of talking about themselves that is like they're always becoming Hopi. Like it's not a category to just put yourself into. It's an ideal to continually strive for, is to become Hopi. And biology too. Biology sees that everything is always in process. But that's, I think, a very ripe area for innovating language because it is always in process. And the way a lot of biology works, you need the one and the other. You need your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. You need the cells to open and close their boundaries, to let chemicals in, let chemicals out. And where am I going with this? Process, right. Yeah, so in a noun heavy language, process is very difficult to convey because we tend to default back to what we're familiar with, which is the nouns. Actually, this would be, I think, maybe something you can speak to in terms of neurology too, is that when we get new ideas, when we get an expansion of some sort, there's often a pullback, like the rubber band stretches and then it'll want to go back into its old shape.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can think about biological habits in a way, and I think that's actually an interesting line of thinking with your book because I get the feeling, and it is just like the body in a way that like when you do certain exercises, you're literally sort of hurting your body and you're breaking habits and you're creating new ones. And it's kind of like that with the central nervous system too, in a way. But in the book, you talk about we can't solve problems from the same mindset in which they were generated, and there's a reason why we should try to do this, right? It's because it's generative and it gives us something in the sense that in the same way that exercise might give the body health, right? How would people begin to understand what the motivation is for breaking out of old habits, right? Or because, it's comfortable to just have your habits, use your language. Nouns, it's a very safe thing to have nouns and everything fits in their category, and this all sounds very confusing, and hard.
Well, the
What's your say to that?
motivation yeah, that's a great question. Because the motivation is really, it's deep, it's existential right now. Because these habits of mind that we've had have gotten us to a point of nearly destroying the world by nuclear weapons at one point, creating an unsustainable climate, creating an economy that is entirely dependent on getting growth and bigger is better, and on trying to grab as much for yourself, you know, without regard to other people. Like, I'm separate from you, therefore I need to, have all of my stuff. And so these things are all coming together in you've heard the term the meta crisis or the poly crisis. It's multiple systems that are kind of all reaching, potentially a breaking point. And when one starts breaking, they all start breaking. And that could be really, really catastrophic for life on Earth. And at some point, we have to realize that we need to work with Earth. We need to work with the processes, not against them, if we're going to survive and if everything else is going to survive. And so to do that, we can't go into trying to solve the meta crisis as we would go into trying to solve, a problem, how to fix your plumbing, how to repave your driveway, whatever. Those kinds of, simple solvable problems, because these are all problems that are very interdependent. And when we start breaking the interdependencies in our language and separating them into, well, let's just solve this problem today and forget all the others, that's not going to work anymore. I mean, it might have worked for a while, but it's not going to work anymore because these interdependencies are becoming very fragile.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we see it in a lot of different ways, and some people might think, well, okay, everything's bad, but then other people might think, oh, we're in the best time of our life right now. Like, to speak of this either or, and trying to embrace the paradox, I think we're at a moment all around the world where a lot of people are living in very different realities, right? Some people will really identify with what you just said. Other people that I know will think, what is she talking about? Like, the world is richer and greater, and like there's so many wonderful things happening right now. And that's very hard to get your head around, especially, yeah, no matter which side you're on. And for me, that almost becomes a meta reason why we need to be embracing paradox, because that is a kind of rigidity within itself that we've sort of gotten into these ways of thinking about the world that it's either about to end or it's wonderful or whatever. That itself kind of shows us that maybe we want to find a different way of holding that, of
Mhm.
understanding what that is. Not only because we do have all of these issues right now. I mean, nobody can deny that there's a lot of pain in the world, no matter how good we might have it, whoever we are. But like, how do we learn to maybe there's a whole other way of being in this world, right? I want to open that up. Like that we've assumed that this is the way things work, I think is a narrowing. And no matter which side we're on right now, I think there's a whole other universe of potential possible that we aren't seeing so long as we stay in this either or way of
Yeah.
thinking, because it is so limited by its very nature. So I just want to put that out there for anyone who's listening who might not, because everyone is on in a different place who comes to this podcast sometime, and that's kind of part of the project. But I think no matter where we are, actually, there's another possibility that's opening up with this idea of the Mobius strip that you showed us at the beginning. But there's actually another way of kind of being alive, which I find very exciting. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
Yeah, it is very exciting, actually, because we haven't been there yet. This is like one of those cultural jumps that is about to happen, and we're we're either gonna let it happen or not. And, then what happens?
it's kind of a different way of thinking about who we are, isn't it? I mean, isn't that what
Yeah.
happens when you change your languaging habits? You literally change the way you talk about I and you. I mean, something very profound really does shift on the level of what am I in this world and what's possible and how connected am I to everything around me.
Yeah, yeah. And so if you start feeling connected to everything around you, you start behaving differently toward it. If you don't feel connected, you feel like, well, I can exploit that. I'm not connected to that forest. I'm going to cut those trees down and make a lot of money.
Mhm.
But if you feel connected and you live within those connections and you see that the tree is not just a tree. The tree is home to, bunches of other creatures. The tree is shade. It's keeping the earth cooler. The tree is lungs. It's literally keeping us alive by breathing out oxygen. And so the Nora Bateson likes to say the thing is never just the thing. It's always a system of relationships. And when we start to see that, and when we start to see how dependent we are on all those other relationships, we're going to think twice about whether, well, that's my hope, is we'll think twice about whether we're going to cut that tree down or extract all that oil or, burn that or dam that river or, whatever it is we think we're going to do to better control our environment by understanding our relationship to our connectedness with everything else around us. We might think twice before just turning it into a commodity.
Yeah, and to go to that Mobius Strip idea, that old way of thinking is I'm on one side of the paper and nature is on the other, or humans are here and trees are there. But if you start to realize this interconnectedness where you're always on able to go on both sides, then that changes the way you might think about the tree in that example that you gave, or even the person you think is your enemy or something, because what you do on one side of the paper is literally going to change the other. It's actually one thing. And so you start to realize you're in a kind of a dance or a relationship with this thing that you think you're fighting against, and that shifts something in the relationship.
There's a quote that I have in the book by Daniel Schmachtenberger. I don't want to misquote him, so let me just find it.
Yeah, find it.
Quick. Here it is. He said in one of the podcasts that he did, and it just struck me as like so perfect for understanding this kind of interconnectedness. He says, the thing that I'm okay causing harm to will end up harming the thing that I care about.
And that's so true and so hard to understand because we've kind of built our identities on defining against something else.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's scary when we're so used to it that we think we don't have an identity if we don't have that conflict or that pushing against. And yet what really matters and what really is that inner relation that's changing and growing. And we often think we're doing something out of care by resisting or fighting the opposite. But how do you seek care in this way? Or even, if we think about language and how it would hold these things, how do you see that shift of, is it about questioning, for example? I mean, what can begin to kind of open those new portals into that deeper sort of care that's not just a care for the us that's versus the them? It seems to have, like, when I was reading your book, I was thinking you're kind of trying to get us to notice a different way of being in the world. And part of that is becoming aware of how we use language.
Yes.
Like that's almost the most important thing is to hear yourself using language. And questions seem to be, the way that one can
I
begin to
love
do that.
questions. Yeah, that goes back to college too. When I wanted to know, like, how is it that we can ask a question about something that we don't know about? Like, there has to be some basic that we do know about. And then what does this question do? It takes us into the unknown. And that to me was like really exciting. And so, yeah, I love questions. And I think that if we can humble ourselves enough to be able to ask, I mean, it takes a a humbling, because you have to go, I don't know that, and how do I actually try to get to know that? It can be, I don't know you. How do I actually try to get to know you? And if we approach the world in that way, not like, oh, I already know it, I have mastered this. We can elicit more of the the potential of what's in every single one of us, every single being. And when we do that, we can find our commonalities. We can find our shared similarities and differences. If you ask, well, how does the hummingbird view the world, and get into like understanding like how the hummingbird actually perceives, how they relate to other hummingbirds, other birds, how they relate to the bees, then we start understanding more of these webs of interconnections, and get off of our sort of uh, high horse of thinking, well, we're the apex, creature on this earth. We're not. There are creatures that, have solved a lot of evolutionary problems already. And are being able to relate to them in ways other than, oh, that's just fill in the blank. The whale might help us be able to solve ocean acidification if we only opened ourselves to what the whale knows. And I do think there are ways that we will be able to develop to communicate with these other beings, whether it's psychically or whether it's through AI. I know there's some work being done to communicate with whales and dolphins and things like that using AI. But I think we can also develop our own inner abilities, not just the outer technologies, the inner abilities to listen, to really feel connected. And when you can get to those points of being really connected, then who knows what can happen. I mean, some people use psychedelics to open themselves up to that. That might work. I think we actually have the capability to do it without psychedelics. And this being open to things that we at this point like can't even imagine are possible. We need to start imagining. We can start imagining, things, possibilities that did not seem probable before.
I
Like,
love what you said about asking the question. That idea of how can you ask a question about something you don't know about? Because that makes me think of that strip too, which it's not really just a strip. It's like this multi-layered, multi-dimensional, ongoing happening with no beginning or end, which can sound psychedelic, but I also think we don't need psychedelics. They just help some people. But when you were speaking, I was thinking, yeah, there is that connectedness that really is there
yeah,
all the time. Like, we don't actually have a choice, even though we have devised these ways of thinking of ourselves as separate. And it is like the way that you can ask a question. So you must know something to be able to ask the question, even though obviously you're asking from a place of needing to know more. That feels really potent to me, and how through kind of maybe being able to bring our awareness to that, we might have a different possibility for what's sensually possible as life. That it's already there and very potent, but it has something to do with trust, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. It has a lot to do with trust. That's a good point.
What does that bring up for you? That because this is hard stuff. I think life
Mhm.
is not, even when we all know that we're connected and we have these ideas for how we can solve problems and that things can be generative, and I really believe what I said about that we're just barely beginning to understand what's possible for our connection and our relation. There's a lot of things that are just kind of hard to hold, and I wonder if all of this that you've been through since you were in college and writing this book, if you've found a way to trust in that connection, that whatever is holding us, the embrace.
Yeah. So um, again, it's a both and. Because as Emerson, no, it was Goethe, who said something about boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. So on the one hand, you do have to like be bold and do stuff. But on the other hand, you also have to allow and watch for the synchronicities. I think synchronicities are like when you know that like the flow is happening um because it's like magic. Sometimes it just feels like life happens magically. And but when you're trying to force something too hard, the magic stops. Because your your ego's getting in the way if you're trying to force something too hard. But you can't just like sit back and go, okay, life happened magically. That it doesn't work that way either. There's like this playful, okay, I'm gonna do this and watch and see what happens. And dance with life itself. And that's not easy because we're not trained to do that. We're trained to go out and conquer.
Yeah, I think that's the reason we do kind of cling to our nouns, because
Yeah.
we want to have these definitions and we want to, it's the way it's structured. It's like you meet someone, what do you do? Who are you? And you're supposed to kind of have these categories that you fit into that
Mm.
put you somewhere, relative to wherever they are. And as some of that's important, as you said, we need distinctions, and you talk about that. What what happens if we come into those places already knowing that we can never actually adequately answer those things, that we are multiplicities, um, and that we're going to communicate as sort of a shared a shared movement or a shared life to try to better understand one another. That's like a whole different place than two separate things, coming to kind of tell each other who they are.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So the questioning is about curiosity and it's about wanting to know who the other is. And so when we come together, um when we have and everybody like has a different worldview. I mean, even though you and I like share the same culture, we there's enough of a difference in worldview that there's a lot of room for exploration. So now imagine coming together with multiple cultures that really don't see the world in the same way. Like say an Amazonian tribe. Um and a like well, I'm you can just really pluck any different cultures and put them at the table. And then, how do we actually learn to see the world from their perspectives? I mean, the West has been sort of on this, trying to force the world into our perspective. Maybe it's time to like bring all the people with different perspectives, different worldviews entirely different ways of perceiving into the conversation and be able to converse. I mean, this is a I think a healthy challenge to have. And if we can solve this challenge, um, we'll be able to keep the infinite game going a little longer.
Yeah, I wonder how we can, that reminds me in the book you talk about speaking from wholeness, not about wholeness. I think that's what you're trying to get at a bit with saying we need to change language. Maybe not saying we don't need to use distinctions and contrasts, but it's the place we're starting from that we understand we are wholeness, and then we're going to put things in to kind of different categories and move it around and stuff, but only so as to understand the multiplicity that is our wholeness. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you talk about fragmentation. This word fragmentation comes up through like Alan Watts and maybe David Bohm and stuff. And speaking from wholeness, and there's all these layers and dimensions. How can we sort of embrace that without it becoming fragmentation, if you know what I mean? Because that seems to be part of the why that you wrote this book that you get to in chapter 20. I wonder, like what are you what's going on there with the language and in that not giving way to that fragmentation, I guess.
Yeah. So language is it's kind of its own entity. And while we all use it, we don't have dominion over it. It also uses us. And so changing language is it's a collective thing. It's been kind of arbitrary so far. Somebody invents a new word, somebody uses a word differently on TikTok, and it all explodes, and so now everybody's using the word differently. And so it's happened in a very sort of, haphazard way. And what I'm trying to do is say, well, maybe we need to be a little more thoughtful and not just add new words, use old words in new ways, but actually try to rethink how language is structured. But we can't say, okay, we'll form a committee and they'll go do it for us, and then we'll all just, obey. No. That's colonization. That is not going to work. So it has to be like generated by people for people, but done in such a way that we're understanding where we want to take it. It's a very tricky process. I don't, have a 5-point plan for how to make it happen. We do have to come together and we have to start using the language we have to invent a language we don't yet have. And that's asking a lot. I mean, we were able to use, the technology we had with metallurgy and electronics and, fuel to get us to the moon. So we can do things like this. But because language also mostly operates at a very unconscious level, whereas engineering does not operate at an unconscious level, this is why the questioning process, we have to understand, well, what are the assumptions that I have, that my culture has, that are built into the way the language is structured? And how can we, like, this is one of the assumptions, that there's one side and there's another side. How do we build in a new assumption that those two sides are actually one side? They're distinct but not separate. And it's going to take bringing a lot of people from different cultures who speak different languages to the table. King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, his knights were from the different parts of the country, and he needed their different perspectives to understand what was going on in the whole. And so the more we can come together and share our perspectives and truly try to understand them, for a Wall Street broker to say, go to the Amazon and try to and like get to understand like how the people in the Amazon understand how to live with the jaguars and the monkeys and the river that floods and um I think is important. I mean, it's important to open oneself to all those different perspectives, um and be able to learn from peoples whose perspectives are wildly different from yours. And it could just be your neighbor who's, the opposite political party. There's something to learn, and there's a both anding, or a not just both. I mean, we have to start somewhere. So I started with two. I started with, either or and both and. But where we're going is to multiplicity, and getting to then be able to hold multiple perspectives. So that's, I'm not sure that actually answers your question, but it's sort of my vision for like, where's this going next? And what do we need to do to get there? We need to come together.
So would it be fair to say that we're trying to question the water that we're swimming within, in a sense?
Yeah.
Use
Mhm.
language to question language. Is that sort of the praxis? And even what I heard you kind of saying there and what comes up is that when you do notice these kind of things that jar you, which often are those kind of things that you think are the opposite side of the paper, right? Not the Mobius strip, that maybe we start to understand those are ways to know ourselves better or to deepen our connection and care. And so that becomes a different kind of endeavor, doesn't it? That we're going to
Yeah.
then use language to know ourselves through this thing that seems like the opposite of us that we seem to hate. Just that very kind of orientation comes through the questioning a bit, doesn't it? The questioning of the way that we're using this. Or do I have that right? I mean, that's what I'm kind of
Yeah.
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 So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Be-
So is that a do you see that as a way to deepen how we can care? And I mean, this is love and philosophy. So I don't know if this word love comes into embracing paradox for you at all, or how if you have any experience of love relative to all this that you might want to share, or, what that word could possibly mean. But before we go, I just at least want to kind of put it there and see.
Love is very important. Because you need it, it's not just a feeling. It's not just the rush of oxytocin. It's a field. And so when you're in this field and you actually love, let's use the metaphor of a field. If you love the meadow, then you are in a real connection with it, not just like a cognitive connection, not just like an intellectual connection. You're actually in a feeling being kind of connection. with whatever it is, the field, the forest, your house, your friends, the city.
That's that kind of transformation that we can't put into words exactly, but that we've been talking about this whole time, of taking what you've been taking for granted, right? Like, let's say the field, the meadow. And once you understand that it's some part of you that you're gonna get to know, then you start looking at it with a different way. Maybe you start looking at the soil and how you can make it healthy. Maybe you start realizing you can grow all these amazing beings that then feed you on this meadow. And it just becomes like a fractal possibility of things. And actually, that is just from that turn of attention to considering it as part of you and as in relation with you. So I think that's actually a really beautiful idea there, and it's very Mobius Strip like, right?
Yeah, it is.
Is there anything about the book that you wanna be sure people know or that we talk about before we go?
Um, well, I'd like to say that, okay, so this book um is it's not easy. It's not sitting at a beach read. If you like stories, some people like like the cognitive challenge. If you like reading a story, you can get a lot of these same ideas in my earlier book, which is a novel, which it's not quite as developed as this, but the early and the important things, if you just want to sit and read a story and try to get it, it's like philosophy. It's like the way Socrates taught, you know? He taught philosophy by engaging people and questioning, and so um I wanted initially to try to engage people that way as well. So whatever your cognitive style is, if you like to learn by reading stories, or if you like to learn by reading um a developed set of thoughts, there's a book for each style.
The One That Is Both, that's a great title. I don't know that book, I haven't read that one. So that's an actual story? Like, that's a fiction
It's a
or
novel, yeah, it's fiction.
Oh, that's great, I'll have to look at that. It
Yeah.
reminds me of Not One, Not Two by Francisco Varela. It's a philosophical, very hard paper, but I love these kind of ways, or Gregory Bateson, It Takes Two to Know One. So there's, like, always 3. I really love that, and I think that's, another kind of Mobius Strip with language. So,
Yeah.
thanks for bringing that up. And, yeah, thanks for talking with me, and
Thanks for having me. This has been fun. It's always wonderful to meet other people who are already like in the embrace, in the paradoxical embrace.
so many people are trying to figure out a way to be in the world in this way, that embracing paradox, holding paradox, or whatever. And yeah, it's good to get together and try to explain it from these different positions. So, and thanks for the work you do. The book is really has so many interesting things in it. So I think people will really enjoy it.
Well, thank you, Andrea. This has been a lot of fun, and I really, as you can see, I love talking about this. So anytime.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Lisa.